Swimming like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.
Hey everyone, this is Mark Scribner. I'm your host with my co-host John Warner from Link Ventures here today on the Shrimp Tank. We have an amazing guest. His name is Richard Tharin from Cerneos. I had to struggle with that a couple times. Amazing gentleman, has been part in his history of over 25 successful launches of companies, and we're going to bring him on in just a minute and talk about Cerneos and how they're so cool. And the space that they're in right now is in has a lot of applications for the pandemic and some of the things that are out there. And being Massachusetts based, pulling from amazing resources, we're going to kind of dig into why Massachusetts is a good place to have a company like Cerneos and some of the things that they're capitalizing on. With that said, you can follow this show, all our prior shows on the Shrimp Tank podcast.com/Boston, Spotify. We are nationally syndicated through iHeart. You can follow us on YouTube, basically anywhere that you can get your podcast, you can find us. And inside the link of YouTube, you can do the subscribe button, and we'd love to get your followership. So John, tell us what's going on with Link Ventures. Why is Link Ventures crushing it all across the board and having amazing things happen right now?
Yeah, Link is doing great. We have invested in close to 10 companies. We help direct-to-consumer companies scale. We have expertise with data and analytics, and we help customers get to their consumers really fast and grow. And we're trying to build billion-dollar companies, and we're in a bunch of different direct-to-consumer verticals, and we're looking for another 20 companies to write $1 to $10 million checks into. So Link Ventures is based in Kendall Square. We tap a lot of the best talent from the MIT community. We have a lot of MIT DNA, and it's great doing the show with you. We talk to amazing talent, and I know we've won the hockey Stanley Cup once, in the last few decades, and we almost won it more recently, but we've been winning the Stanley Cup in biotech for years. And, Boston is one of the most relevant places for biotech, and I'm really excited to hear what our guest has to say and how he's part of that renaissance and what he's planning, what the chess moves are for the future.
So that's a great segue. Richard, thanks again for coming on the show today to tell us about your company. Could you just real quickly give our listeners an overview of what Cerneos is and what they do and kind of why you are in the sweet spot of what's going on in the world right now?
Well, Cerneos is primarily a regulatory consulting firm. What we do is we reduce pain by providing clarity to the process from a scientific concept to the patient's bedside. We get paid to work with innovators that want to develop an idea but are trying to get out of the lab and into the clinic, out of the clinic and into the marketplace. We work virtually, remotely, and internationally. We like the Boston area because it has a wealth of scientific talent, educational opportunities. It's friendly for business and international, and attracts a lot of international business. What we try to do is to help clients build their castles in the air. Our job is to build foundations under them.
So that's an interesting segue because I don't know if this would be parallel to John's world. I think it probably would, but oftentimes, if you're working with a scientist or the scientific community, they're really good at one thing, potentially being the innovation, the technology. But do you find oftentimes when, I hate to label, but generally speaking from a knowledge set, are they lacking in the areas of like, they have the concept, they've come up with something that's maybe proof in concept, but in terms of the completion and all the hurdles that they have to go through from an implementation perspective, is that lacking in your experience?
It's not so much that it's lacking. We want our scientists to be passionate about what they believe on. We try to coach them in a way so that they can communicate their ideas and their passion to other people. And what we do is provide realistic expectations of how they can market it. Our first question is whether they can, not whether they can do something or not, but ask them what are they trying to achieve? What market are they trying to address? And how they're going to treat patients. We don't expect our clients to learn everything about business. That's what we're here for. whatever resources we don't have or the client doesn't have, we use strategic partnerships to find manufacturing sites, clinical trial resources, financiers, reimbursement consultants. We can even help build laboratories, since we work with construction and facilities people, as well. We've worked with a lot of companies in Boston centered business incubators. We work in the biotech, cancer, rare diseases, diabetes, and a lot of other things. We have been dealing a lot with EUAs, and with vaccine and diagnostic development. It's not so much what an entrepreneur knows or doesn't know. We take the entrepreneur for where they are, what they're trying to accomplish, and provide them the resources to help them move their products forward.
So years ago, when I was in college, I was on an advisory board for the March of Dimes, and I visited the Jonas Salk Institute. And I think about the polio vaccine being brought to the public. We've gone through an extraordinary last few months with some vaccines, Moderna right in our backyard, being made available. I'm just curious, what tailwinds does the pandemic era bring to biotech? What are some new normals in creating life-saving vaccines that might have come from this period? So different from how it's been done in the past. And I guess the follow-up question is, do you think there'll be more waves of the coronavirus that we're going to have to deal with and be ready for?
It's not so much the coronavirus, but I think to your initial question, I think we have the vaccines against spike proteins because of AI technology, and AI is going to influence a lot, in the future, with rational drug development. I think that we're going to have to take a more fundamental approach to the immune system and understanding it from a cellular and a humoral level. I think the age of AI, and information technology has made, rapid vaccine development and EUAs possible. We realized that, we have to pull together. We had to in World War II, to take, even the most, outlandish idea, and make it possible and make it work. And I think there's going to be a lot of improvement, or should be, between, the government, the military, the private sector, and, our educational institutions to contribute to global health. So a combination, of collaborating virtually, globally, and using information technology is going to do a lot, for not just for this pandemic, but for others. Coronavirus is one of those viruses that mutates rapidly. That's why we've been so frustrated, with the variants. It's also one of the viruses that causes colds, and that's why we don't have a vaccine for colds, is because they have to be generated by viruses that mutate a lot. Whether we need to be scared or constantly on the outlook, I would say no, but I do think, by being aware, having better, surveillance and response systems, and better diagnostics, and a better comprehensive public health strategy is what's going to get us through problems with superbugs, with other diseases, and using computational and AI techniques. I think that's going to be the future, for disease management.
Richard, one of the things we talked about offline, which was Cerneos spends a good amount of time trying to be ahead in terms of empowering and looking at certain science and trying to make the science more or less consistent from an education and development perspective. You talk a little bit about, like, the spaces that you actually invest your time in to try to make some of the science more uniform and get everybody on the same page. And the reason I am wondering, and this is just a long time ago, I had a friend that was doing research for pharmaceuticals, and I don't know if this is still true, but it was astonishing, probably 10, 15 years ago, that they would literally have 10 scientists in a lab, and more or less they were all competing for the same grant dollars, but they wouldn't be required to share information. If someone was going down a rabbit hole incorrectly, it was actually to maybe that scientist down the hall's advantage to get access to that funding. I don't know if that's still the environment right now, but so my two questions are, what is your company doing in kind of like trying to change the narrative and the education? And then, is there any, like John mentioned, tailwinds around, what we've gone through fast action with this virus, and maybe some infrastructure changes that will be coming as a result of it?
Well, the first part of it is that we can't operate without having a good, strong science base. So what we do is we study, we use public health officials to advise us what are, the trends in healthcare, what's affecting it. I think, when I started at NIH, we had a lecture from Dr. Julie Gerberding, who was then the head of the CDC. She said, yes, we are concerned about, SARS, smallpox, and other bioterrorism agents. But it turns out the most debilitating condition was actually obesity, since it affects, most Americans and has a lot of health problems with it. I think what we try to do in Cerneos is to look at where the health problems are, try to encourage, be proactive and encouraging scientific research and hooking up scientific partners, with tech transfer offices, with nonprofits, and disease societies. So even if it doesn't result directly in client leads or pay, we always, try to encourage, scientific development from the early stages, hook them up with the right partners. That's why we're a member of so many proactive nonprofits. What I see happening in the tailwind is that we are going to, continue, to investigate trends, promote overall, public health, um, find, the right, technology resources, for our clients, and to, help them get to the market, faster or more efficiently. Along the way, we educate everyone what the process is, because if you try to do and memorize anatomy or trying to memorize things like organic chemistry, memorizing doesn't work very well. So what we try to do is to think of the FDA regulatory process as a flow, as a physiology, or a roadmap. Look at the spirit of what, the agencies, whether it's EMEA, National Health Service, Health Canada, understand what they're trying to achieve: safe and effective products for their intended use. That's what, we're about, and we find the right partners. Hopefully, we can work with Link in the future, to expand, our product development capabilities, for all.
Mhm.
There's no one answer to what's going to come next. What we want to be is to be a part of the solution by proactively, supporting, the right technologies to deal with our worst healthcare problems.
Mhm. Go ahead, John.
Great. I liked how you mentioned AI. I don't think of AI as artificial intelligence, but assisted intelligence. And I think AI definitely has a place in the biotech life science world, and it's exciting that you recognize that and you're helping to facilitate it. So I have a two-part question. One is manufacturing. I know Stefan Bonsell of Moderna was really proud of having a manufacturing background coming out of business school. And I get the feeling that manufacturing is playing more of an important role in bringing things to market and in your space. And just curious on your thoughts on that. And then just going up a level, at the end of the day, Mark and I were very interested in helping entrepreneurs and startups find opportunities to create great companies, successful companies, companies that go the distance. And I'm wondering what you see are some of the business opportunities in front of you. I personally at Link, we've invested in healthcare.com and a health insurance play, and Minded, a telemedicine play. We're working with software online. We're not doing the life science world, but I'm tracking it, and I do think it's a big part of our economy, and I get the feeling you're right in the middle of some of that.
Well, we try to be, and we don't wait, we don't wait for people to pull us up, we find, opportunities and going forward. I think with artificial intelligence is realizing that, you have to, make, better predictive models. And I think AI, can do a lot with that. I think what's happened lately in manufacturing is that a laboratory has to make changes with social distancing, with PPE, and with ventilation. It means either shorter shifts, more rotation, automating more processes, or setting up barrier systems, for any kind of laboratory-based manufacturing. Uh, I think the success of a company is learning how to pivot, learning how to listen to people and collaborate. You might have a very visionary CEO that wants to get a product out aggressively as possible. But I think the more successful companies have a more longer view rather than get there fast, get there first, get used to the trendiest technology. Do they have the will? Do they have the emotional stability to deal with changes? Sometimes things fail at just the wrong time. That's why drugs are so expensive, is because they're trying to reimburse for the failures that they have. With changes in manufacturing, I think we're going to see new technologies develop and making the process um, better controlled, better predictable, because in biologics or in biotech, you're not talking about stamping something out or mixing something. You're talking about a living system doing your work for you. The factories are actually the cells themselves, or the molecular biology that do things that they're naturally programmed to do. You just give them the nudge in the right direction.
So I was curious. There's been a lot of press in the past 6 months, let's say, with these big partnerships where, like, I think in downtown near Fenway, like they're repositioning like these big commercial office spaces into manufacturing facilities, mostly for COVID, I think. But it
Okay.
seems like a lot of the different innovators are partnering up with these big manufacturing facilities, because I'm sure there's an enormous cost and, like you said, to pivot. But do you see that kind of like increasing now, where you have like these big hubs, almost like Amazon, like distribution center type things?
Yeah. I see that a lot. It's necessary because it's called just-in-time manufacturing or just-in-time processing. Uh, I think the logistics business has been growing, especially for the last 10 years, to eliminate warehouses, and to what it does is it eliminates the tax burden, to reduce inventory, which is fully taxable. You make it, you ship it, it's gone.
Mhm.
I think that the problem with logistics manufacturing, or is what's called a line clearance. You have to make sure that you isolate products before you start a next run. That's in the pharmaceutical world. That's especially dangerous whenever you're manufacturing any kind of antibiotic, like penicillin or erythromycin or digitalis. And,
Like cross contamination issues and things like that.
exactly.
Right, right.
So, you know, I think that we are going to have to go to a pivoted structure, because it's very expensive to develop a manufacturing line, and secure it. What's going to need to happen is that if you're having diversity of projects, is to deal with compatibility issues, and demonstrate safety in isolation systems, so that the products that you do bring into the plant are compatible with something else. And sometimes they're not.
Does quote unquote warp speed kind of change the whole industry, like the level of speed that the prior administration was boasting was unheard of? But does that dynamic change the landscape in terms of, like, from start to finish with FDA and regulatory approval,
I,
where you get emergency use type stuff?
well, warp speed is one program that's been on. There are been about 10 since 2001, and since the letter bomb to Senator Daschle. Uh, my interview for graduate school happened to be on September 11th,
Mm.
in 2001. Uh, I think warp speed is the latest pejorative. It's just more or less of aligning and reorganizing FDA reviewers, making sure that they have dedicated resources for high priority products, so something doesn't land on a consumer safety officer's desk and stay there.
Mhm.
That certain things get accelerated approval means that they are reading faster. It's more like reducing the steps and review times necessary to move it forward. Warp speed is just the current iteration of the FDA's policy ever since Project BioShield began in early 2002. What is needed is to make sure that any time that you have an accelerated approval process, that you have the right and qualified reviewers, involved, and that you're not eliminating, safety steps, that could, bite us in the behind later.
Mhm. Good job.
I was talking to Shrina Srinivasi the other day, and she was saying how there are a lot of neurons in your GI tract, and that kind of like a pacemaker for your heart, you could have a pacemaker for your stomach, and pills that you could take. I'm curious on if you think there are any interesting opportunities or trends around your esophagus and stomach and large intestine that are creating businesses that haven't existed. And then with people living longer, are there other opportunities there for a good business?
I think so too. The word that you haven't used is the microbiome. But yes, we're very much doing some initial research in the area. We do see that there's a strong connection between the gut microflora, and depression, CNS, cardiac health, and disease. So yes, I mean, it's not so much, you have to think of the microbiome or the microflora as everything in the system, not just in the esophagus, or your small intestine, but how, those communities interact with each other. We've been working on that for centuries with probiotics, and, infusions. But I think what the science is trying to do right now is to look at the microflora as a community and how that influences health. We've long seen links between cancer, heart disease, and the microflora. What we're trying to do is to find, a consistent flora approach, to treating diseases, not just as overcoming a symptom, but restoring, the microflora and microclimate that's needed, in the body, to maintain health.
Right. Hey, Richard, I was really curious about, I don't know if you have this vantage point, but oftentimes kind of the rap, if you will, in at least the pharma space is, you hear this, like, people get their pills from Canada, and the US, innovates, and the United States bears a lot of that R&D. And then, ultimately it's a business as well as doing great work life
Sure.
science wise, but these private equity firms or these investors aren't just stroking checks always because it's a good thing. And so at some point, and maybe this is pulling the curtain back, but when you look at some of the therapies, are you applying a filter, for example, and saying, like, cholesterol, like that's a, multi-billion-dollar space, and, are you applying a filter for a concept what the marketplace will look like? Or there's a lot of different diseases that are very important to the people who have them, but they don't necessarily represent a big market share. Is there any filters and thinking along, like, where's the opportunity?
We get approached by a lot of nonprofits, for, rare diseases or orphan diseases that are very emotionally, challenging, especially with Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, or any, or Tourette's, or, any other, CNS or developmental diseases. We don't try to change the agenda, but we do try to influence the science, to push forward to what, is the greatest thing. To families that have kids and adults with degenerative and rare diseases, they're devastating. They have, people have had to sacrifice houses, careers, move, and change lifestyles. It's not as simple as importing or re-importing drugs, from Canada. I'm not sure how that business works, and it's been changed a lot, trying to eliminate, antitrust, barriers. what I'm doing in Cerneos is trying to identify, the worst health conditions or the ones that are the hardest to solve, and finding the science base, and the technology base, to move them forward. I lost a friend, when I was working at NIH, because her condition was insolvable. It was catastrophic. And the only reason people heard about it is because there was no way, that the family could afford, the catastrophic care. Nothing medically could have saved her, but I think we are going to see a lot of crowdfunding, for rare diseases because our reimbursement system isn't working, for catastrophic diseases, rare diseases, orphan diseases, genetic diseases, um, developmental diseases, dementia, um, AIDS, late stage AIDS, spinal injuries.
So crowdfunding, you think that's going to be a future workaround for that type of, the smaller, kind of rare disease type space where you'll see people amass groups and crowdfund for those solutions?
It shouldn't have to be. It's asking your neighbors for help, with the tin, cup.
Mhm.
It's always a last resort. What needs to happen is a better investment, and a better, reimbursement and integrated, healthcare system that recognizes, these issues, that doesn't force families, to beg their friends and personal networks, for help. I think with catastrophic illness, that's been the only way, so far we've had, to fund nonprofits, for an individual, or for a condition. Uh, I think we're going to see, that increasing because this year of lockouts, and lockdowns, with COVID has forced, a lot of people, to lose their homes, and, lose, their treatments. Uh, I don't know what the answer is, but an integrative approach to rare and catastrophic illness as part of our reimbursement system probably has to be worked on. Uh, I don't think that we've already seen what's happened with our healthcare system and what has worked with the COVID crisis, that you need to take a more fundamental, approach to integrating science, technology, and public health, in planning, for overall long-term health of our population.
John, I think you had a question.
Oh, I was just going to ask the FDA, friend or foe?
I think it's never that simplistic. I believe I've worked with a lot of consumer safety officers and reviewers. It's true that at the highest levels, you have, the smartest people, and at certain stages, within the agency, you have people that, need to get work off their desk, and need to follow policies. I think the COVID crisis has forced the FDA to take an intelligent approach to reviewing. Uh, they're a necessary stakeholder. You're not getting around them since they're the central health authority, and competent authority for drug device, biotech, and pharmaceutical, approvals in the United States. Could they be friendlier to business? Yes. Can they be more efficient? Certainly. Do I doubt their overall integrity? No.
It's good to know. So we're about to wrap up. I would like to remind all our listeners, you can find this show, all previous shows on the shrimptank.com/Boston, iHeart, Spotify, anywhere. We'd love to get your followership. Richard, for our listeners who would like to learn more about you and potential partnerships or your company, what is the best way for our listeners to get a hold of you?
We're available on LinkedIn at Cerneos, on Twitter at Cerneos is our tag. Our URL is http cerneos.com. Find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and let us know. We also work with the Westchester Biotech Project. We've worked with the Mansfield Bioincubator, North Shore Technology Council. Just Google Cerneos Group is probably one of the fastest ways to find us.
That's great. Well, thanks for all your great work. We appreciate your time today. And we'd love to have you on down the road for an update about some of your new projects.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, John. It's been great working with you today.
Thank you so much.
I've been feeling like a shark in a shrimp tank. Big fish, small pond in the shrimp tank.